welcome to today's panel discussion on compensating employees in a declining economy, balancing business sustainability and employee well-being. Thank you so much for taking time to be here, whether you're an HR professional, you're a business owner, an employee, consultant, or you're just curious about navigating the tough economic times we're facing here in Ghana and beyond. My name is Bambi Laye. I'm going to be your moderator for this afternoon's conversation. Now, we all know that the economy isn't what it used to be. Now, businesses are tightening belts, costs are rising, workers are feeling the pinch. Question is, how can we fairly compensate our employees, not just in salary, but also in support, without pushing our businesses over the edge? That's a conversation we're going to be having this afternoon. And we have a power panel to guide us through. And so I'll go right into introducing our panelists for this afternoon's conversation. Now, our first panelist is a senior manager in the People and Change Unit at KPMG Ghana, with over 15 years of experience across the HR space, both in consulting and in industry. Now, she has experience in strategic HR management, talent management, and compensation and benefits management. She's a member of the Society for Human Resource Management, and she holds an MBA in Human Resource Management. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Ohenewa Appiah. Hi, Ohenewa. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bambi, and thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for making time to join us. And so moving to our second panelist for today. Our second panelist is a manager in the People and Change Unit of KPMG Ghana, and she has over 10 years of experience in HR consulting. So she has experience in job evaluations, organizational restructuring, remuneration surveys, and HR strategy, among other HR activities. Now, she is a member of the Human Resource Certification Institute, Virginia, USA. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Emmeline Quist. Hi, Amy. Good afternoon.
Hi, Bambi. Good afternoon.
Thanks for making time to join us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Right. Now, to our final panelist for today, she is a manager in the Deal Advisory Services Unit of KPMG Ghana, and she has over 10 years of experience in transaction and corporate financial advisory services. Now, she has led assignments in feasibility studies, business plans, and financial due diligence, among other things. She holds a master's degree in economics from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Matilda Ansah Appiah. Good afternoon, Matilda.
Good afternoon, Bambi. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for making time to join us. Okay, before we delve into our conversation for today, I want to set a few ground rules. Now, we'll have time for a question and answer session toward the end of the conversation. So please jot down your questions until we get to that point. In view of that, please make sure that your microphones are muted so that we minimize distractions as much as possible. Please let's also do well to respect one another's views so that this becomes a very safe space for everyone to learn. Finally, you're at liberty to drop your comments or your questions in the chat box, and then we'll read them as we go along. Thank you very much. So to begin the conversation, I'll move straight to Ohenewa. Ohenewa, what are your thoughts on the topic for today?
Okay. So, I think it's a very interesting and timely topic. Compensation has become one of the major discussions at the leadership level when it comes to people. We are in times where organizations are seeking solutions to navigate the challenging economic situation. And our employees are very key in ensuring the long-term survival of business. And so in these situations, we need our businesses to be viable, and we need our employees to be motivated and more productive when it comes to being more creative on compensating practices and driving results. How do we look at that? How do we navigate those issues? How do we ensure that though the businesses are in challenging and difficult times, we still have very creative compensation practices that will drive results and result in business sustainability. So I'm looking forward to a very engaging session where we all look at some initiatives, people related and compensation driven, that would ensure that our businesses stay sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ohenewa. We can't wait to learn from you. So throwing the same question to Emily, what are your thoughts on the topic for discussion today?
Bambi, I think Ohenewa really captured it properly, but let me just bring it home a bit, right? Everybody's feeling the pinch from an employee perspective and from an employer perspective. So now the question is, as an employee, how am I being compensated adequately, right? And we also have employers saying, hey, how can I compensate my people and ensure that I'm still declaring profit? So that's really what it is. So this is a very timely discussion, and I'm excited to be part of the panel.
Thank you, Amy, and we can't wait to hear from you as well. So I would move to Matilda now. We are delving right into our conversation, and we want to start by understanding the key terms in our topic for discussion today. And so when we talk about a challenging economy, Matilda, what exactly does that mean?
Thank you, Bambi. The country is said to be experiencing a challenging economy when there's a sustained period of declining economic growth, and even some signs we have negative economic growth. And there are key indicators that we can look at when we are talking about a challenging economy. Key amongst them is the country's GDP. That is to say, the total value of goods and services produced in the country. A consistent drop in the growth of the country's GDP can be said to be an economy that is facing challenging times. We could also look at consumer spending. People become more cautious with their money when the economic outlook is uncertain, leading to lower sales for businesses. There's also the rise in unemployment. As businesses face lower demand and profitability, they reduce their workforce, leading to more people without jobs. We could also look at inflation. Inflation is a little bit tricky. So inflation is a sustained increase in the general prices of goods and services in an economy. That would mean that the purchasing power of consumers are being reduced. So with the same amount of money, you can't buy the same basket of goods over time. So in a declining economy, this could lead to lower inflation, and that was seen in 2022. In 2020, December, when inflation was around 10.4%. But in terms of GDP, the growth was about 0.5%, and this was mainly due to a reduction in demand during the COVID period. It is also possible to have a challenging economy with high inflation, and that was seen in 2022. Ghana's inflation was as high as 54%, and real GDP growth also declined from 5.1% in 2021 to 3.8% in 2022. So these are some of the factors that we can look out for when we say an economy is in a challenging time. Thank you.
Thank you, Matilda. Clearly, when an economy is in a challenging time, both businesses and employees struggle. Employees have lower purchasing power, and so they are buying less, they are spending less, which in the long run means that businesses are making less sales and all of that. So at the end of the day, both parties are suffering. I like the fact that you mentioned that when it comes to a challenging economy, people tend to lose their jobs. And I know that for a lot of employees, once you talk about business sustainability, then they are anticipating layoffs, losing their jobs. Moving to Ohenewa, what would you really say business sustainability is? And what are the key considerations for businesses when it comes to business sustainability, especially from an HR perspective?
Thank you. So when we talk about business sustainability, I mean, generally we are referring to where businesses operate in a way that's economically viable, socially responsible, and also being conscious of the environment. So it's more around creating long-term value for our businesses in a way that would benefit all the various stakeholders. So shareholders, employees, customers, the community, and the environment as a whole. And so when we zoom in on HR, as HR, how then do we put in practices that translate into viability for the business? Or what are the sustainable HR practices that we can put in place, focusing on the triple P, so the people, the profit, and the planet? What practices do we put in place to ensure that the people initiatives take into consideration all the three Ps when we look at it as a whole, and not just focusing on people, not just focusing on the profit aspect? And so in terms of business sustainability, we are looking at how we are ensuring that we are creating long-term value for the business, and also creating value for our people as well, because our people are the ones that will generate the revenue. Our people are the ones that will implement the various strategies that we have and ensure that the business is sustainable. And so the practices that we put in place that relate to ensuring the businesses are viable into the future, long-term sustainability. That is what we focus on when we talk about business sustainability in relation to HR. And then zooming in on compensation, yes. So what specific practices can we put in place when it comes to compensation? Compensation cuts across different areas, but when we take it on an individual basis, what are the practices that we can implement to ensure that the business doesn't suffer on the angle of profit, on the angle of planet, on the angle of our people as well as a whole?
Thank you, Ohenewa. I want to stay with you a bit. Let's talk more about compensation. Now, for employees, when you talk about compensation, we're talking about cash, we're talking about salary. I want you to unpack this term for us, compensation. Is it just about money? What else is involved in compensation?
Okay, so I'll pick it from the world at work perspective. So when we talk about compensation, we are looking at all the rewards that are provided to employees in return for the services that they provide, right? Financial and non-financial, it includes the benefits as well. So let me look at it in terms of 4 key areas or 5 key areas. We look at it in terms of the basic salary, the cash allowances, the various benefits that are offered. Benefits cut across so many different elements. So for some, they provide the accommodation, health and medical benefits, retirement benefits. There are some organizations that provide professional development, among others. So these are all benefits and form part of compensation. We also look at the various allowances that are offered. There are several allowances that organizations offer. Some organizations offer rent allowance, some offer transport allowance. So there are different allowances that come to play, or different elements on the allowance side. And these are also part of the compensation. Then we talk about the incentives, where we have the short-term incentive and long-term incentives. So short-term incentives, we are looking at the commissions, we are looking at the bonuses that are offered to employees. And then for long-term incentives, we are looking at the equities or stock options that some organizations offer to employees. So all in all, these key elements form the total compensation. Compensation is not just the salary or the take-home, but a comprehensive package covering your basic salary, your short-term incentives, your long-term incentives, your cash allowances, your benefits that are provided either in kind for you or in cash, depending on what kind of benefit it is. So these all form an aspect of compensation as a whole.
Thank you, Ohenewa. So now we've spoken about a challenging economy, we've spoken about business sustainability, we've tried to understand what compensation really entails. Let's talk about employee well-being now, and I'll be moving to Emily at this point. Now, Amy, we know that employee well-being is becoming a buzzword, and it's often linked to mental health-related issues, very, very common among Gen Zs. We want to understand what this concept of employee well-being really is.
Okay, Bambi. So really, when we talk of employee well-being, we're really talking about ensuring that employees are supported enough that they can bring their best versions to work, right? And sometimes this means that we're providing mental support, we're providing physical and emotional support, and even financial health support. Now, for Gen Zs in particular, they are more open about discussing issues around stress, anxiety and burnout. So you find that a lot of the employee engagement initiatives are targeted towards these generation. But in answering your question, employee well-being goes beyond the mental health initiatives. It's providing support to employees around benefits, looking at career development opportunities, and we're also ensuring that we try to promote a positive workplace in all organizations.
Thank you, Amy. So employee well-being goes beyond compensation. It goes beyond mental health to include other factors such as career development. Now, before we continue with the conversation, I'd like to remind us that we can drop our questions in the chat box or our comments, our contributions, and we'll read them as we go along. Thank you. Now, moving back to Matilda, we now understand what a challenging economy is. Question is, from a finance point of view, how does a challenging economy impact on salary planning, on bonuses, on payroll commitment?
Yes, so with the current economic pressures, it does complicate financial planning for businesses, especially on employee compensations. So when it comes to salary planning, we can talk about budget constraints. Businesses face tighter budgets and may need to implement stricter controls on salary increases. Traditional annual increase in salaries may significantly reduce or even be frozen. There's also forecasting uncertainties. Predicting future revenue and profitability becomes more challenging, making it difficult to commit to long-term salary adjustments. And there's also competitive pressures. While budgets are tight, businesses still need to attract and retain talent. So they must balance cost cutting with staying competitive in the labor market. Bonuses for a challenging time, if company performance decline due to the economy, achieving bonus targets becomes difficult. Bonuses are often the first area where businesses would reduce expenses during economic downturns. So the decision to cut down bonuses should be clearly communicated as well to employees to avoid damaging employee relations. When it comes to payroll commitments, businesses need to ensure sufficient cash flow to meet regular payroll obligations. Delay or inability to pay can sometimes have legal and reputational consequences. Even without raising salaries, there's also health costs or other mandatory employer contributions, which are increases that would also cause payroll expenses to still rise. Thank you.
Thank you, Matilda. So even in the face of economic challenges, there are legal implications. There are things that businesses need to pay attention to. I mean, they are not spared from that just because economic times are not very good. Moving back to Emmeline, what are some of the common compensation-related challenges that businesses are facing because of the current situation?
Right. Bambi, I think Tilly has touched on quite a lot, but I would add on. So we'll look at inflation and the rising cost of living, right? So this would directly impact the purchasing power of employees, and it can be very tricky adjusting salaries quickly enough to keep up with inflation. And there's also that ripple effect of dissatisfaction among employees. And then we look at pay equity issues. Now, are people being paid fairly for their work without any form of discrimination, right? So it means that employees that are doing similar jobs should receive similar pay. And like factors around gender, around race or other demographics should not unfairly influence their salaries now. We also look at compliance with local laws. Ghana has very specific legal requirements for employee compensation. So requirements around mandatory social security contributions, our tax obligations, all of these things, businesses need to ensure that, they navigate properly so that they avoid penalties. But at the same time, they need to stay afloat so that they are offering attractive compensation packages to employees. And I think Tilly also mentioned economic uncertainties, right? So when there are fluctuations in the economy, you realize that businesses they make more reactive than proactive adjustments to pay. So this just to add on to Matilda's points.
All right, thank you, Emily. I want to move back to Ohenewa. Now, Ohenewa, you have sat in the seat of the head of HR before. And we know that, I mean, these things are being said nicely. Businesses should try and make sure that they are doing right by their employees. But sometimes the reality is that the businesses are suffering. I want you to tell us what internal pressures HR teams face when they are trying to advocate for staff welfare in the face of all of these challenges.
Okay. So, I mean, there are a number of internal pressures that HR practitioners face, but one of the major challenges that you need to tackle or deal with is tackling the conflicting priorities. So while the primary focus of leadership, especially in the survival mode, is to ensure that there's cost cutting and there's efficiency, improvement, and all that, the other side, which is the employee side, is also how we ensure that they are being fairly compensated. There's a lot of investment on their end as well. And so, as an HR practitioner, how you prioritize and how you ensure that the conflicting parties are all aligned becomes the major hurdle to tackle. So, I mean, one of the key focus areas is clear communication or transparency. We need to ensure that both parties are aligned on the current situation or the real situation. In some instances, employees are not very much aware of the existing situation of the organization, and it makes it difficult for them to appreciate the fact that we may need to cut down on some costs. We may need to be more prudent in terms of our costs. And that's where HR needs to come in. There has to be regular communication, regular updates. You need to get the people aligned on exactly what is happening. There definitely needs to be that transparency, which obviously would also build the trust. I mean, we can look at the business as a cake that we all need to share. Everyone has to get their first life. And it's important that we all understand that if we work together, we can even bake a bigger cake. But where they don't know what the reality is and they feel there's a very big cake sitting somewhere, then people get dissatisfied because their slice is quite small. So transparency becomes very key as an HR practitioner if you want to drive the agenda for both the employee and leadership in terms of compensation. The other area is also getting leadership to understand how employees or the people aspect is tying into the overall strategy. So we've seen from the work we've done and over the past that mostly it's improving now, though, but mostly HR doesn't sit at the table, or even if they do, in terms of the information that HR brings to the table to support decision making, doesn't come with the necessary metrics or the necessary support to ensure that we are aligning our people agenda with the bottom line. So are we going to the table with metrics like the return on investment, like cost per hire? Because if we are losing people, what is the impact on us in terms of cost per hire, employee engagement metrics, turnover rates, among other metrics that we can share with leadership. If we are able to share this with leadership, then also they also get to appreciate what the clear challenges are. And then on the other side, we also get employees to appreciate what the clear challenges are in terms of their business financials. Then both parties or on both angles, we can be more aligned. So really, the major challenge that you need to tackle is getting the conflicting priorities aligned and getting your communication across clearly so that for the employee and for leadership or for the business, we are all clear on what is happening and how we can work together or what initiatives we can implement to ensure that the business is viable into the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Ohene. So from your submission, there are two broad angles. First of all, getting leadership to appreciate that business survival is not equal to employee neglect, right? And then on the other hand, we're looking at the fact that we need to be transparent with our employees so that they are aligned with what is going on. I want to go back to Amy Dean. I want to find out from you. Assuming leadership appreciates that, well, this is the case and we cannot neglect our employees because of the current challenges, but they do not have the means of supporting employees in terms of money, I mean, financially and all of that. Are there alternatives that they can consider?
Yeah, Bambi, I think Ohenewa had mentioned earlier on that when you're talking about compensation, we're not just looking at salaries, right? We're looking at total rewards. And so, yes, there are specific, things that we can look at pulling here and there to ensure employees still remain adequately compensated, regardless of the financial challenges. In some instances, you'd find that there are specific roles that you can make the decision to pay higher based on your business strategy. So if you're a product-based organization and you want to incorporate AI into your products, it just makes sense that you decide to pay senior level engineers above maybe the 75th percentile to even the 80th percentile, because these are your critical roles, right? These are the critical roles in your organization. However, every other role, maybe you can look at paying at the 50th percentile. But like anyone mentioned, you need to be very transparent. Your employees need to understand what goes into your compensation strategy. You need to always make sure that you are, communicating, communicate. And you think you have communicated enough, I assure you haven't, communicate some more, right? But there are other levers that you can pull. So now we have the cash in hand versus just our base salary increases, which ultimately would increase your total cost to employer, right? We've noticed that employees tend to appreciate more, handing the cash in hand than getting the little by little, month by month salaries coming in. You can also look at subsidizing some things, right? Just so that you can provide some financial relief to employees. Look at some things that employees use regularly. It could be something as little as mobile phone data, but try and give it to them in cash, right? Looking at some of the factors that Matilda had spoken about, the GDP, looking at inflation rates across sectors. Take for the agri sector, for example. So you say, hey, it looks like the prices of groceries are increasing. How about we partner with a grocery store and subsidize grocery for staff, right? Now it looks like we're going heavily into the remote work era. Provide a one-off stipend to employees. Let them spend that on their home office. It looks like AI is not the next big thing. Hey, how about we subscribe to an ethical AI tool that employees can use to make their work more efficient? Because you realize that lots of these AI tools, you have to pay for them, and sometimes they can be very expensive. So these are some things that you can look at to see how you can make your compensation strategy a bit more attractive. But more importantly, I always say look at your different personas within your organization. You have the Gen Zs, you have the Gen X, you have the millennials. What exactly do they need? We need to ask them. We need to hear their voices. And based off that, we can come up with some initiatives, right, that they would appreciate. But we need to ask them. Now, sometimes HR it looks like we're almost sitting down in a room, in a dark room. And after 3 days, we come out with some next big thing, right? And people clap for us like, yeah, we've done something. And that's all fine and good. But have you listened to your employees, right? It's saying, let's understand what they want, provide them with things that they would benefit and appreciate. That way, even though you're not spending too much, because you have the employees appreciating it more, you tend to see that sort of has a more positive effect to employee engagement. Expand your EAPs, your employee assistance programs, right? So these are some things that we can touch on.
Thank you, Amy. So clearly, it's important that we have relevant data, to help us to strategize when it comes to all of these things. Now, I want to stay with you a bit, Emily. Beyond getting data from employees, are there other sources of data that HR practitioners can leverage?
Yeah, you can look at benchmark data, right? What are your competitors doing? And what can you do to remain competitive based on your strategy? And this is where your compensation philosophy will come in. So you think of your compensation philosophy as a compass, right? Now, this compass would tell you what type of strategies that you put in place, what type of programs you put in place, what type of policies that you develop to ensure that your employees, are motivated to drive your strategy, right? So these sorts of things help you, look at your external data within the industry, see how well you can remain competitive, but it has to be aligned to your strategy.
All right. Thank you, Emily. Before we continue with the conversation, a quick reminder that you can drop your comments and questions in the chat box. We see questions coming in. Please keep them coming. Okay. I want us to move back to Matilda. Now, Matilda, we understand that times are tough. We understand that employers need to find a way to still keep their employees compensated well enough, right? But even if we decide to not necessarily increase salaries, but then subsidize a few things here and there, we're still going to be incurring cost. Now, my question is, what financial planning methods can help businesses to stay afloat while still trying to compensate their employees properly?
Yes, so there are several financial planning methods businesses can look at to help them navigate challenging times. I'll touch on a few of them. Businesses can look at their working capital management. That is to say that businesses should minimize their inventory holding costs and take advantage of supplier credit. So if your supplier have a credit policy, you should take advantage of that and don't hold up inventory so that you are holding up capital without having cash to finance some of these payroll obligations. You should also look at your receivables. You should be chasing your receivables. You shouldn't be selling on credits for a long period of time. You should be looking at that as well. We'd also want to look at cash flow forecasting. You need to consistently project your cash inflows and outflows to ensure sufficient liquidity to meet these payroll obligations. This will help identify potential shortfalls early and also develop mitigation strategies. There's also the need to look at essential spending. Okay, you need to, as a business, clearly distinguish between what spendings are essential and non-essential expenditures for the business. Employee compensation, as we know, is a core essential cost. The business should also look at cost optimization. So businesses need to identify and implement strategies to reduce non-labor costs, such as renegotiating supplier contracts or reducing energy consumptions or streamlining operations, and that will help businesses stay afloat in challenging times. Businesses can also look at diversifying their revenue lines. Okay, and businesses should consider multiple products and services that would make them reduce their vulnerability in downtimes in specific areas. And key also, businesses should look at their customer relationships. Businesses should look at building strong customer relationships. We all know that loyal customers are more likely to stick with businesses in tough times. So in staying afloat, businesses should look at their working capital. So they should optimize cost as well, look at their spending. They should also forecast cash flows and also look at diversifying revenue lines.
All right. All right. So, Matilda, I think earlier in the conversation, you spoke about the kind of impacts that the current economic situation has, on salary planning and all of that. So I remember you mentioning cutting bonuses or freezing salaries or salaries are delayed and the like. Moving back to Emily, are there some ethical recommendations that you can, highlight when it comes to this kind of situation?
Yeah, Bambi, there are actually, first of all, leadership should share the burden, right? When your company is struggling and you're letting employees know that this is the problem, that's not the time where you are changing, you're upgrading your company cars, right? So they should demonstrate commitment by first making, the sacrifices. And then try and protect vulnerable employees. So when we are looking at this cost-cutting measures, do it in a way that it doesn't affect the lower paid workers, right? And then let's try and think long term. So I think Matilda mentioned that you have the loyalty of employees, but you can do that through non-monetary benefits, right? And even future growth opportunities. So trainings, either ways, HR will provide training. Make sure these trainings are targeted, right? it pushes employees to also do more, because we're saying, hey, we're trying to move from point A to point B. And for you to move to that level, these are some of the competencies that are required of you. And this is how we can help you. So it is thinking long term as opposed to just short term. And then prioritizing transparency. We always have to be open about the company's financial situations. It helps build trust and understanding within your organization. So I think those are some things that I'd like to share around that.
All right. Thank you so much, Emmeline. So we have a question in the chat box. The first one says, and I'm directing this to Ohenoa. So the first one says, what steps can HR take to compel senior leadership to act on clear market benchmark data showing that remuneration is below industry norms, especially when the company has the financial capacity to close the gap? Ohinoa, before you respond to that, just another reminder to our audience that you can put your questions in the chat box. We are actually having a Q&A session now. So if you have any questions, you want to make any contributions, please feel free to do that now. So I'll take the question again for Ohinoa. The question is, what steps can HR take to compel senior leadership to act on clear market benchmark data showing that remuneration is below industry norms, especially when the company has the financial capacity to close the gap?
Okay, thank you. So in terms of getting management to appreciate where we are as a business and how we can navigate the challenge we find ourselves in. So when we say we are below the market, I'm looking at probably below the 25th percentile of the market or below our expected compensation philosophy. So each organization has a compensation philosophy and where we want to be. And so if we are saying that we are below that based on market data, first of all, what is leadership appreciating the fact that we have defined where we want to position ourselves? If there's no compensation philosophy, then it means that we are just looking at the data we got and where we are falling. But the first option, which would support the decision or support the argument, is the fact that this is where we have decided as a business to position ourselves, which means that as organizations, we should all ensure that we have a philosophy when it comes to compensation. We have a decision around where we want to play. We have a decision around where we want to fall when it comes to the industry or the market we play within. That said, if we have identified that we are below, what are the other data analytics that we are supporting this decision with? For instance, what is the turnover of the organization? How are we supporting that with the information that we are getting from the salary survey? What are the data we have? What is the data we have in place regarding employees that have exited the organization? What has been the common issue that runs through? Are there issues that relate to compensation? Are there issues that relate to the findings that we have from the salary survey? So it's more around supporting the information that we have from the salary survey with some additional data that points to the fact that the business viability is very key, and the fact that if we don't resolve these challenges that we have identified, it is going down to affect us in the long term. Most of the time, we find that we may just pick the data or the survey outcomes to say that we are at the 30th percentile, and ideally our plan is to be at the 75th, and so we should close the gap. Beyond closing the gap, how does it impact our financials? What is the data supporting that, yes, we are below the 75th, and these are other challenges that we are seeing from positioning as it stands with the data that we have gathered. So all these go to support the argument and to make management also take a look at the suggestions or the initiatives that we are bringing on board to see how we can realign our compensation structure.
Thank you, Ohinoa. Mohammed, I hope your question has been well answered for you. So we have a second question in the chat box. Now, before we take that, it'll be good to know where you are also joining us from. In the beginning, we introduced our panelists. So If you do not have any question or contribution and you don't mind, you can share your name and then which organization you're joining us from. Okay, so our next question, I will throw this back to Emmeline. Amy, I think you touched a bit on this, but let's go right again. Looks like our people want to hear you more. And so what are some effective non-monetary benefits that have proven to positively impact employee satisfaction during economic downturns? I'll take it again. What are some effective non-monetary benefits that have proven to positively impact employee satisfaction during economic downturns?
Okay. At the risk of not repeating myself, we did touch on looking at trainings, skill training, ensuring that we're providing upskilling to employees is one way that we could look at it. But looking at the economic downturns, we could provide cost of living allowances to employees, right? That's cooler. You could look at some of the things that employees really use frequently or regularly and look at subsidizing these things. So partnering with lots of service providers and, provide employees with some financial relief in using these services. We are looking more at flexi work arrangements. So your remote work options would be something that you would look at heavily. So offering flexibility to your employees, looking at your flexible hours, all of these things. Just make sure that we are providing some sort of financial relief to employees. At the same time, when we're telling them that, look, we know that these are hard times, but we value you, and so we are trying to build you, right? So, and it's also going to be against your business strategy. So this is where the organization is looking at going, and this is where and how we want you to help us, right? And these are the things that we're putting in place to support you. So if you look at all of this as in a nutshell, beyond just your compensation, you're looking at your total rewards. And all of this as a capsule is more appreciated.
Thank you, Emmeline. Helena, I hope the question has been well answered for you. Now, there's another question that came in earlier during the registration. I'll take that and then probably have Ohenewa answer that. Emmeline, I think you can top up if you have any additional responses. So the question is, how can organizations design compensation and benefits packages that are both financially sustainable and competitive enough to attract and retain top talent in a rapidly changing job market? So I'll take that again. How can organizations design compensation and benefits packages that are both financially sustainable and competitive enough to attract and retain top talent in a rapidly changing job market?
Okay, so in terms of designing a compensation package that suits your employees and also suits the business, if I should put it that way, there's no one size fits all in this situation. What is the business, the whole philosophy regarding compensation for the business? What are we seeking to achieve with our compensation? How competitive are we in our market, right? These are all questions that we need to answer to be able to arrive at that compensation that we are designing for our employees to attract and to also retain our talented staff. So that's why it's very important that as organizations, we try and see how we compare when it comes to our market. These are the places that would pick our high flyers or high performers. And so how do we compare to the market when we look at our compensation? And also, compensation, we should look at it in terms of total rewards, not just compensation, especially in the situation where we are in some financial difficulty. What are some of the packages that we can offer that can support our employees? It doesn't necessarily mean we are giving financial benefits. So Emily touched on some of them. Are there employee discounts that we can provide in terms of partnering with other organizations? What are the performance-based bonuses that we can provide to our employees? Do we want to implement some remote work or flexible work arrangements? How do we ensure that career progression is fair in the organization? How do we ensure the total well-being of our employees are at the top of mind when it comes to leadership? All these feed into the total reward package, and that is where we should be focusing on, and not just the compensation. But specific to the compensation, again, looking at our industry, how we compare, where we are, what is the gap, how are we able to bridge that gap? We may not be able to bridge that gap readily, but there has to be a plan to it. So if we are, say, 20% below the market, what is the plan towards bridging this gap? Working together with finance, how do we do this? Bringing in employees on board to understand this is where we are. This is what we can do if we are able to achieve our revenue. And so what are the steps that we can take to achieve the revenue that we expect? And once we achieve that revenue, we also ensure that as leadership, we also honor the promise of how we also break the gap between where we are and where the market is. So it's not an easy task. It's difficult because businesses things are moving on. The economic challenge is still in play, and we still have to ensure that our people are also well motivated to be more productive and ensure that the business also achieves its revenue. So essentially, those are the key considerations that I would say you look at in terms of building a sustainable compensation system in these challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you, Henel. Emily, any additional thoughts on the question?
Yes, so if I should add on, I would say that in looking at our compensation strategy, we need to build it in a way that it is flexible, right? As we are growing, you were able to move along. So now the first thing to do is try and the minute that you notice your market is changing, the economy is changing, and compensation also has to change alongside. That's very important, right? And I'll take a case in point, maybe a small scale enterprise or even a startup IT company, right? If you're trying to, these guys would have tight budgets. Let's start off with that. But if you're trying to bring in really high skilled individuals to your organization, and you have tight budgets, so meaning that you can be spending on salaries and benefits, what are some ways that you can align your attractiveness of your company so that people will want to come in, right? So it depends on the discussions that you're having at the management level. Are we looking at base and performance-based salaries? Are we looking at base and equity, right? So that are we providing stock options to candidates or employees that are coming in, so that how well your business does, right, is how strong your stocks are. And so it's going to be tied to performance as well. You're pushing people to do the best, to give of their best, regardless of the fact that you are running on tight budgets. So you need to look at your environment, your business environment that you're operating within, and look at some of the things that are important to your employees. Because in that same scenario, if that's a small scale enterprise or that IT startup company, if they are acquired by a bigger company, right, it means that they could still be a subsidiary of the overall company, but the stock options may not be as enticing to employees as it was previously. And so what else do you do, right? This is when you align to say, hey, what do the employees really want, right? How can we look at long-term sustainability as opposed to just looking at short-term? So we always need to play a mix and match game in ensuring that our people are adequately compensated, they are engaged to push our business objectives, right? And like Ohenua said, it's never a one size fits all. So it's really dependent on what your business strategy looks like that you can build your compensation strategy around.
Thank you, Emily. There are more questions for us from our audience, and so I'll take another one. This question says, how do we use employee compensation to reduce employee turnover? How do we use employee compensation to reduce employee turnover? Emily? any of you to answer the question for us. How do we use employee compensation to reduce employee turnover?
Okay. So again, we'll look at it in terms of the industry you are in and how your compensation compares. How competitive are you within your industry? Another area that we can look at is where your people are really going to. Where are your high flyers moving to? It might not necessarily be just your industry. So for instance, if you're in the banking space, maybe you have people, depending on the nature of the role, moving into the insurance space, moving into the other sectors, right, which are not directly the banking space. So the question is, what exactly is the reason for the move? What did we do when it comes to our exit sessions? What did we do when it comes to stay sessions, the stay interviews that we normally have with our people? What data did we get? How have we analyzed that data? How is that data supporting us when it comes to driving compensation strategies in the organization? And so all these would help us appreciate what exactly we need to do to be able to help bridge the gap or help ensure that our people, that retention is high. The question is around exit, right? So ensuring that retention is high. We need to understand where they are going to. We need to understand how competitive we are within our market. We need to understand what exactly we are putting in place when it comes to our compensation package, the various allowances and benefits. Are they even realistic? What we are giving, are they the ones that are meeting the needs of staff? The surveys that we do, the employee surveys that we do, the feedback we get on compensation, what exactly are they relating to when it comes to compensation? What are the gaps we've identified? How have we addressed them? And so in terms of meeting the employee needs and ensuring that they stay, ensuring that retention is high, once we know what the challenges are, then we can address that. But the clear one or the obvious one is the fact that we look at our competitiveness within our market to see where we fall, because that is the basic that employees will look at. How competitive am I compared to my colleague in another organization who is doing same work or who is also handling same tasks within that organization?
Thank you, Ohenua. Yes, thank you, Ohenua. And I think that one of the key things you mentioned is the fact that organizations need to pay attention to their exit and then stay interviews. Clearly, there's a lot of information that businesses can get from those interviews that can help them to design proper or good compensation packages for their people. And so if you're on the call and your organization is not taking these interviews seriously for now, please make sure that you add it to your action points. Okay. Emily, do you want to add anything to the discussion?
Yeah, so I think Ohenua has touched on majorly what it is, but there's always going to be an organization that pays better than where you are. It is what it is. Even with marriages, you always say that, hey, there's always going to be someone more handsome than your husband or someone more beautiful than your wife, right? And so it's saying, what exactly would you put in place that would make your people stay, right? And most of the times it's transparency. First of all, we need to make sure that we have a very good pay architecture within our organization, right? Your people also know what your structure looks like, what your grading structure looks like, what your salary structure looks like. You have to be very transparent with them. So it's saying that, look, as of now, you're on this grade in this band, but if you move on, this is where you're going to. And these are the competencies that are required of you to move to this level. And this is how we're helping you go. So already you have a career progression path that has been drawn for your people. So they know where they're going the next 2-3 years, right? There's a plan for that. And most times some employees would appreciate that more than just jumping into the next organization because they pay more, right? Sometimes. So these are some things that you can also put in place within organizations that, hey, everybody needs to understand there should be pay transparency within organizations. And that way, when you do that, you'll be able to identify the pay inconsistencies and rectify them. It's definitely not going to be a one-day thing where you just snap your fingers and it happens. But once you have put things in place, you know that you're in the right trajectory to having the right pay structure within your organization.
Thank you, Emily. Clearly, I mean, especially when it comes to pay inconsistency, and know that that is one of the very major issues that some organizations face. Why is this person earning more than I am? I mean, why are we doing the same thing and yet I'm not being compensated equally, with this other person? And so I think that clearly is another key area that the organizations need to pay attention to, making sure that every job in the organization is well evaluated, every job is put on the appropriate grade, and making sure that on the grade that they have been put on, they are being appropriately compensated according to whatever salary structure design you have in your organization. So thank you so much for that, Emily. There's one more question that we have from our audience. So the question is, how can we balance employee compensation and business policies in a situation of an unstable economy? How can we balance between employee compensation and business policies in a situation of an unstable economy? I'm throwing this back to Ohenewa and Emily again. Any of you to take the question?
Okay, so I mean, one of the key things that come to mind, so the balancing the employee compensation side with the business policies or the business strategy. What is the current situation? Probably the business is facing some challenges and has decided that this is how much we can offer. This is a strategy in terms of our finances. This is where we need to cut costs, right? This is what we can do to ensure that we survive or we stay afloat. Therefore, HR, in terms of compensation, needs to look at how do we tie our compensation into this whole business strategy. What are the expectations of staff? What are they looking up to? Are they looking at increases in basic pay? Are they looking at new benefits and new allowances being offered? And how does it tie in with the business situation? We have mentioned that it's important that we make it very transparent for employees to understand where we sit as a business, and employees to understand what policies there are or what strategies there are, or the strategic direction to ensure that the business survives. Right. So while that communication is there, it's a difficult one, but that communication has to be clear for people to understand where the business sits now and what we need to do to ensure that we are surviving. Then again, we come back to look at the compensation package that we have, the different allowances. What are they serving? What purpose are they serving? Maybe we were providing lunch, maybe we were providing gym packages, maybe we're providing different offers to employees just so that they are motivated and also get retention gets higher, right? And so look at it again and see, do they still align with the strategy of the organization? Do we still need to pay some of these allowances if they are not serving the purpose that was intended? Take it on an individual basis and try to tie all these allowances to strategy. So these various allowances that we have provided, how is it tying into our strategy? How is it ensuring that we meet our strategic objectives? If there's no clear relation, or if there's no clear path to how it would help us achieve, then really we need to rethink that particular allowance or that particular element that we are offering, that particular benefit that we are offering. And then again, go back to communicating to employees for them to understand clearly where we are and clearly why we cannot support certain elements within the compensation package that we have. So definitely, we cannot borrow to satisfy our people where the profits and we talked about the 3 P's, right? So all the 3 P's need to be satisfied. We can't just borrow and be in debt when we are satisfying the people side. It has to be a balance between the people and the profits. And so let's look at it in terms of all the key elements within the compensation package to see how it aligns. If it doesn't align, then we need to take a second look at it to see how we still satisfy employees and also satisfy the business in terms of its long-term viability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ohenewa. Any addition from Emily?
I think Ohenewa said it perfectly.
Okay, so there's another question in our chat box. Now, this question says, there's been a strong emphasis on the need for clear and transparent communication about the organization's financial situation, particularly when it impacts compensation. What systems or approaches would you suggest to help ensure employees clearly understand and support the proposed changes so as to prevent confusion or unrest within the organization? I'll take that again. There's been a strong emphasis on the need for clear and transparent communication about the organization's financial situation, particularly when it impacts compensation. What systems or approaches would you suggest to help ensure employees clearly understand and support the proposed changes so as to prevent confusion or unrest within the organization? So throwing this back to Emmeline and Ohenewa. Any of you to take the question. Thank you.
Okay, so I think transparency, like we've mentioned that over and over again, but in ensuring that our employees understand the challenges, we need to always make sure that we regularly communicate. I mentioned if you think you've communicated enough, trust me, you haven't. You have to continue doing that. And it could be through different, means. It could be Teams meetings, it could be sending out emails, with where the company is at currently, with where we're looking at going, recognizing employees who have made some, great contributions during that transition period. Whatever it is, it's more like a change management framework. So you have to have that change management mentality. Ensure that the employees understand what it is, communicate as often as you can, right? Be open to employees reaching out to understand some things that may affect them. Now you have situations where people say, well, but we've had that, we've had this training already, you understand this. And you're like, I want to understand, how this part affects us. They are more receptive to hearing it from you because you understand the system, you understand what is going into your structure, and you understand how it affects them. So you're able to put it more into context for them. Having the buy-in of anybody means that they understand what that is, they see what is in it for them, and they are seeing how they can, contribute towards that. It's not just throwing them into the deep end and say, hey, swim. It's showing them that these are the troubled times that we are in, and these are some initiatives that we've put in place to ensure that we're able to, sail through this and come out at the other side successfully.
Thank you, Emmeline. If you think you have communicated, you probably haven't communicated enough. So keep speaking to your employees, keep letting them know what was happening so that whatever you are trying to communicate goes down very well with them. Ohenewa, any additional thoughts?
Okay, so largely, Emmeline has mentioned most of them, but just to add, in terms of leadership as a whole, communicating also means that letting it become obvious that we are actually in challenging situations. I've seen instances where we've gone to communicate to employees that we are in challenging times, we are in difficult times, and then the next minute you see, for instances of departments with new vehicles, the actual reality of practice doesn't support what we are communicating as the situation of the business. And that makes it difficult for employees to also appreciate and align with the fact that we all need to be more cost conscious and contribute towards achieving what we have set as a business. And so it is walking the talk for leadership and ensuring that we all are aligned on what exactly is happening, having regular meetings, talking about our revenue, what have we done, where are we going, seeking their opinion and getting their buy-in. I mean, once they are part of that whole decision and they are part of the growth, they are more likely to align and more likely to work together. If clearly there's nothing, they would understand and they see that in reality, it is obvious that we don't really have much. It is easier for people to understand and appreciate than where leadership is on a different line and we are communicating something different. Thank you.
Thank you, Ohinoa. So this means that for everyone in leadership, we need to prove what we are preaching. So if we're saying there is no money, employees need to see that leadership is also feeling the pinch. It's not just for employees. Thank you so much for that, Ohinoa. And so I think we have exhausted all our questions in the chat box and all questions that came in through our registration link. In the absence of any other questions for now, I would ask our panelists to please give us their final words. So starting with Matilda, any final words on the topic for us?
Thank you, Bambi. I think a lot has been discussed, and it's important that businesses build long-term resilience in challenging economic times. We can't overemphasize the need to look at your costs as a business. Businesses should consider looking at flexible cost structures by implementing strategies to make costs more variable rather than fixed, to help them navigate these challenging times. Businesses should also strive to continuously improve. We can't overemphasize that businesses should improve and be more efficient. Businesses should consider new technologies that would help them optimize their processes and also to identify cost savings and improve productivity. And there's also the need, we've said it severally, there's the need to invest in your employees and to develop with the employee skill set that you have. A highly skilled workforce can drive innovation and efficiency that will help businesses navigate through these tough times. Thank you.
Thank you, Matilda. Any final words from you, Emmeline?
Yes, Bambi. Really, it's all about finding the balance, right? Find the balance in ensuring that your employees are well taken care of, and at the same time ensuring that your organization is being driven to its strategic goals. So employers need to understand that in as much as the times are challenging, you cannot overlook your employees, right? And at the same time, you need to put things in place that helps your employees reach your strategic objectives.
Thank you, Emmeline. Final words from you, Ohinoa.
Okay, so just to add a few, I mean, it's not an easy task. Managing compensation, especially in a challenging situation, is not an easy task. It's quite a difficult one because while you need your employees to ensure that you move away from that challenging situation, you need them to be more motivated and more satisfied. And compensation is one key area that will lead to satisfaction. So it makes it a very difficult situation because the finances are not there. You still, however, need to meet their needs, meet their satisfaction to ensure that the business drive on, the business remains very viable. So it is not something that we should shy away from or avoid because we still need to tackle it if we need to stay afloat, if we need to become very competitive. We really need to take a look at our compensation and how it is driving our strategy. I think one key takeaway should be that as HR practitioners, we should clearly look at our strategy as a business and how compensation is driving that strategy. If we realize that there's no direct linkage between the compensation strategy we have and our business strategy, then really there's a challenge where we need to self-address before we can move ahead. And again, we've touched on transparency and communication over and over again. It's very, very essential that we keep our people aligned, we keep our people well informed. And lastly, looking at the compensation package that we have designed and how it clearly aligns to achieving each of the key elements within the compensation, achieving a specific strategy or a specific initiative for the organization. We need to look at that and ensure that that's led. And maybe lastly, as HR practitioners, ensuring that we communicate with our leadership, getting them to appreciate the compensation elements, getting them to appreciate how the compensation elements together with the people aspect feeds into the larger picture in terms of driving sustainability and driving achievements for the organization. And that should be able to help us drive on as HR people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ohenewa. Now, before we actually wrap up, Abdullah has one more question for us. He's just put it in the chat box and he's asking, what is current compensation trend and how is AI helping? Take that again. What is current compensation trend and how is AI helping? So this is open to all our panelists. Anyone to please take the question. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we had mentioned initially that it's never a one size fits all. So in terms of a current compensation trend, I'm not sure that is a thing, right? So we have different pay components that would factor into your compensation structure, looking at total rewards as well. What type of business strategy do you have? We've touched on compensation philosophy, and we're saying that that philosophy helps you look at the type of processes that you're putting in place, the type of programs that you're putting in place, the type of policies that you're putting in place. All of this tie into your compensation strategy. So in terms of the trend, I think organizations are looking more at different type of pay components. If your basic salaries, is your cash allowances, your benefits in kind, your all of those things. What is the strategy of the organization, like Ohenewa had mentioned, and how is your pay your pay philosophy linked to that? And how are you ensuring that your employees are motivated so that they can drive that change that we're looking at moving towards? And in terms of how AI is helping, it's really helping. I don't know if there's one particular AI tool that's trying to revolutionize compensation packages. Maybe it's coming up. Hey, we're looking at innovation every day, but right now AI is looking at helping us streamline our processes, helping us make us more efficient, right, in our work. So in terms of the compensation package, the compensation trend, except Abdullah has a different way that he wants us to answer that. I'm not too sure we can push towards looking at the current compensation trend.
Thank you, Emily. Any additional thoughts from our panelists?
I mean, one area that we have always looked forward to is to have a system where compensation becomes very transparent locally. So when you look at the other jurisdictions, you realize that compensation is very open, and so getting data on that is even much easier. But here is a case where compensation is so confidential. Even when you are conducting salary surveys or compensation surveys, it's difficult for organizations to willingly give their information, even though it is treated on a high confidential basis. So if we could get to that point where compensation data becomes very open, it really would help. And as Emily said, in terms of AI, if that's the angle that Abdullah is looking at, that is where it would then help with AI looking at trends, because the data would readily be available and help us as HR practitioners to pick that data and use it for decision-making purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ohenewa. Matilda, anything from your side?
So I think a lot has been said. So AI can really help when it comes to looking at compensation trends. It can help automate some of these trends to give real-time data in terms of what the market is looking like and what your competitors are doing. But as Ohenewa said, data might not be readily available. So in this part of our country. So when data is readily available, yes, AI would really be helpful in monitoring some of these trends to help businesses improve on their compensations.
Thank you, Matilda. Abdullah, I hope your question has been properly answered for you. And so we're wrapping up the session. A few key takeaways from today's discussion. So one, we have learned that compensation is more than just cash. Compensation is more than just cash. So there are other subsidies, there's career development, and there's so many other things that business leaders can consider when it comes to compensating employees. Again, we have spoken about the fact that data, dialogue, and transparency are very essential in ensuring that employee well-being is maintained, and then business sustainability is also maintained. Again, we have learned that we need to prove what we preach. So as business leaders, if we are telling our employees that there is no money, and so we have to freeze salaries, we have to not increase salaries yet, we have to delay salaries, and the other things, we need to make sure that employees see that we are also feeling the pinch. And so thank you all so much for joining the conversation this afternoon. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for making the time to be here. My name is Bambi Lai, and I was your moderator for the conversation. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.